Hi everyone, and now for your marine forecast. This is Thursday, August 8th. First of all, take a look at the sea ice edge. A lot of open water, certainly in the Chukchi Sea. Still some very loose ice up there along the Beaufort and north of Udiagavik. The ice forecaster told me that we've got about a month until the minimum ice. So for tonight's weather, we've got a 1,000 millibar low moving into the central Bering Sea. That's part of a system that's down to 996 millibars. The main low still being pretty far to the west, but it's moving very rapidly to the east. Flow aloft, generally southerly over the state, causing still a lot of precipitation. Snow at the highest elevations for the Alaska range, especially near Denali. On Friday, that low moves well into the Bering Sea and it consolidates into one low pressure system at 995 millibars. There's a ridge of high pressure that's built up in the Gulf of Alaska, and that caused some onshore flow for the southeast panhandle. Also a fairly weak low up in the Northwest Territories. A little bit of thunderstorm activity will be behind that Bering Sea low is expected. Then for Saturday, all of that consolidates into a fairly strong, for this time of year, low pressure system, 988 millibars, roughly southwest of Cape Newenham. Full occluded front around that, plenty of wind, plenty of precipitation. Ridge over the Gulf for some onshore flow for the northeast Gulf Coast and down all the way down into the Panhandle. So for a marine forecast for southeast Alaska, a lot of wind, generally south and easterly component for most of the area except by Cape Suckling, 10 to 20 knots, seas up to about 5 feet. And on the inside waters, pretty light, generally around 10 knots and seas 2 feet. And then for Saturday, the winds start to ramp up just a little bit. So what we're seeing, 15 to 20 knots on the inside with seas all the way up to 4 feet in Lynn Canal, but some small craft advisories being posted for the outside waters, winds ranging anywhere from 15 to 25 knots and seas all the way up to 9 feet off of Prince of Wales Island. For our marine forecast for South Central, we're looking at 15 to 20 knots on the outside waters, seas up to about 5 feet. Some westerly component there coming out of Cape Kennedy entrance. Small craft advisory off the very southernmost end of Cook Inlet, 25 knot westerlies, seas 6 feet. Otherwise 20 knots in Cook Inlet and only 10 knots in Prince William Sound. And then for Saturday, now we're really starting to feel that low pressure system that's moving into the southwestern Alaska. 30 knots with some easterly component in the western south central waters, 20 knots in Prince William Sound, 20 knots south of Seward. But note the gale force wind and now seas 10 feet in Kennedy entrance on up to Augustine, 30 knots in Cook Inlet and 20 knots as you get further north. Seas 7 feet up to 7 feet in Cook Inlet. For the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island waters, southwesterlies generally on the Pacific side, 15 to 25 knots and seas up to 6 feet. Chillicothe Strait westerlies with 20 knots, seas 5 feet. And on the Bering Sea side, winds ranging all the way 15 down to 30 knots off of Unimak Island. That'll be a southerly as it responds to that low that's moving into the Bering Sea and seas up to 5 feet down there. And then we're getting into our gales with that system now southwest of Cape Newenham. 30 to 40 knots on the Gulf and Pacific side, seas up to 14 feet, so there'll be a long fetch distance and a pretty good swell in there. And then wind up to 45 knots off of northwest of Coal Bay, seas up to 9 feet and up to 6 feet in Bristol Bay with 35 knot southerlies. pretty rough in there, and the forecasters were really thinking about the Bristol Bay fishery today that would be in that area. For the Aleutian chain, starting out with a few gale force winds already, southerlies in the far eastern Aleutians, 35 to 40 knot southerlies, seas up to 12 feet on the Pacific side, and then 20 to 30 knots as you get further out, seas up to 10 feet, up to 11 feet on the Bering Sea, on the Pacific side, and up to 6 feet with not much fetch distance on the Bering Sea side. And then for Saturday, look for some gales in the east, but ramping down to 15 to 25 knots as you go further out the Aleutians. Maximum seas about 10 feet on the Pacific side, and looking for about 6 to 7 feet on the Bering Sea side. Also 11-foot seas south of Nikolsky. And then for the west coast, starting out with southerlies as it begins to feel that low. 30 knots for the Pribilofs, seas 9 feet. St. Matthew easterlies, 20 knots, seas 5 feet. Otherwise 15 to 20 knots in most of the other waters, and seas up to about 4 feet. And then on Saturday, now we start to see a pretty good circulation around that low. 30 knots in the southern sections, 15 to 20 knots in the northern sections, seas up to 10 feet for the Pribilofs after some of that wind will end up driving a swell up into the Bering Sea. And then for the northern waters, for the Arctic coast, through the Bering Strait on Friday, about 10 to 15 knots or so, seas right around 2 to 3 feet, and then up on the north slope, 10 to 15 knots, seas up to 3 feet. And then on Saturday, starting to respond with easterlies and southerlies, 10 to 15 knots all the way up through the Chukchi Sea, and 10 knots for the north slope waters, seas up to 3 feet and around 2 feet for the Beaufort Sea. So that's it for our marine forecast. Please let folks know where you're going, and please stay safe out there.